Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, we're going to have an important education update, but before that, do you know that Tuesday is an election day in the state of Pennsylvania and across America as well? We're going to have about a little update on that, and I hope that you can get out the vote. We'll do all of that and more following these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, Tuesday, it's a general election in what's a relatively low turnout election. I'm going to let our guest chat about that and some of the offices that are up for grabs. Joining me is Mike Straub. He's the Capitol Bureau Chief. Can I call you that?
I like that. That sounds like I got a promotion.
You got a promotion. He covers the state capitol for WGAL. And John Micek, he's the Editorial Page Editor of the Harrisburg Patriot News PennLive. Both of them will put their Twitter handles up at sometime during the course of this interview. All right, John, a big election. The voters will have relatively little information and the turnout will be low.
Yeah, I mean, this is a so-called off-year election. There's really nothing off about it. I mean, voters will be picking statewide appellate judges, picking county judges, county row offices, local boards of supervisors, boards of education, that kind of stuff. I mean, races that really hit people where they live.
Great point.
But because there's nothing sexy at the top of the ticket, like a big city mayor's race or something like that, turnout's going to be abysmal. It's really tough for folks to get the information they need to pick from these judicial candidates. And you have two candidates running for an opening on the state Supreme Court. You have one justice up for retention. They're relatively youthful for Supreme Court justices. So they have the potential, because the retirement age has been raised,
they'll be there forever.
To be there for a very, very long time. Justice Deborah Todd, who's up for retention next Tuesday, could conceivably become the first female Supreme Court Chief Justice in the history of the state. So it's a big deal, but you're going to have like 20% turnout.
Yeah. Well, if we get to 20, if we get to 25, I say break out the champagne.
Absolutely.
In this election. What's your sense about this, Mike?
Well, there's a whole discussion maybe for another day about whether we should even be electing justices in this state. As the judicial branch should be elected.
But John and I have written
right,
about
for sure. Well, then I guess that'll be another episode in the future for sure. But to John's point, there's so many people who are whining about the taxes they pay in their district that these, the school board folks that you elect are the people who are going to have a larger impact on your wallet in the future. And that's the races that people aren't getting information on, they're not paying much attention to, and may not show up and vote for in the end.
Yeah, in the next segment, I want to talk to you about the statewide property tax issue that I think you want to talk about a lack of information about. I mean, that is below a lack of, if there's something below a lack of, how about no information about? But John, one of the things that Mike talks about is we are about to go through the process of electing officials that in many cases control the police, the taxes that we pay, the quality of schools in the 500 school district.
Dave Barry used to joke that he started his career covering a series of long and boring municipal meetings, some of which are still going on to this very day. But and Mike and I have done, we've pulled that duty earlier in our careers, and you can joke about it, but it's seriously important stuff. I mean, you have school boards who are directly making policy that are affecting your children, who are passing the tax increases that are going to hit you directly in your wallet. So as much as we focus on DC, as much as we focus on Washington, it's these little boards, the zoning boards and boards of supervisors and school boards and stuff that have a real life impact on your life.
All right, let's talk about the property tax thing, because in the next segment, I want to get into gaming. Man, we've had this huge expansion of gambling. We want to talk about some aspects of it. There's a ballot question that voters will get to vote yes or no on. Potentially important, but it's first of two parts. How do you explain?
It's also worded in a way that's very complicated, but the nuts and bolts of this is this. People think they might be voting on property tax elimination, which is a buzzword for so many people. Absolutely. House Bill 76, Senate Bill 76. This is not quite there yet. This is just an initial step towards a future that could lead to your school board eliminating your property tax. So the vote on the ballot this time around only really gives the power to the legislature to begin the process of then handing the power to a school board. So at the end of the day, it still comes back to who you elect on your school board. You're exactly right.
John, don't they have the authority to do that now in the legislature?
Mike's highlighting this. I don't even understand what it does, and I do this for a living. people are going to go in there and they're going to try to make up their minds. I mean, the short form is I think it expands the homestead exemption, expanding the level of property tax that folks can get. But they always throw these fastballs in, and they go into, and because they know that by and large voters are not going to read up on this.
Yeah. But here's,
and they're going to go in and do this.
But here's a bigger point. If you get the property tax is the most unpopular tax that folks pay by far. The second point is this. If they get rid of the property tax, I'm not saying they should do it or shouldn't do it, that means there's going to be a substantial hike in other taxes, whether it's the income tax or the sales tax, and that produces winners and losers.
Absolutely. And then what kind of a school board has the kind of guts? Who's going to be the one to make those steps to say, I'm going to eliminate property taxes in this district and raise everybody's sales and income taxes?
You're talking about a $12 or $18 billion hole, depending on who you talk to.
Absolutely.
And Republicans don't like tax increases, but this is the kind of tax increase that they ostensibly can get away with and because they're getting rid of this one unpopular thing. But you got to boost sales taxes, you got to boost the PIT, maybe an income tax. You have to make up that money somehow, and the reason it's not happened yet is because nobody can find the cash.
All right, we're going to run to a break. We've had the biggest expansion of gaming, I'll say one of the biggest expansions in the history of the country, potentially. You notice the word I use, they're all smiling here. We're going to get into some of that and how it might affect you after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Well, we're going to talk about the expansion of gambling. Mike Straub and John Micek join me, both reporters. John is editorial page editor now, but he's also a reporter and a columnist. Mike covers the Capitol for WGAL for News8. All right, Mike, go through some of these expansions. On paper, it looks like you're going to be able to go to if we had a telephone booth, there'd be a VGT terminal. There'd be, we don't have telephone booths. Go through some of the big highlights.
Some of the pieces of more gambling in Pennsylvania. The VGTs you mentioned in places like truck stops and potentially other places.
5 of them. 5 machines.
Five VGT. Yeah, that means video gaming terminal. Gambling right on your smartphone, which is interesting, and or tablet device. I guess I should keep that open-ended. And but also mini casinos. You've heard the phrase kind of satellite casinos.
10 of them.
10 of them across the state. So more gambling in your neighborhood or at your fingertips.
Yeah. John, let's talk about a couple of these. So they're going to talk about 10 mini casinos. They have to be, as I understand it, 25 miles away from a big casino. But the big casinos have first opportunity to get the license to open these minis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just more money for the big gaming interests. We were talking about this before we went on air. Sheldon Adelson, the big Vegas casino magnate, dumped a lot of coin into trying to kill VGTs. He lost that, but ended up winning anyway because he's going to be able to get first dibs on these satellite casinos.
Yeah, but here's one concern that I think. Look, after 2006, I think that's the year when we opened up casinos in our state. The state of New Jersey lost 5 of their 12 casinos. So is there is it just that the revenue is going to decline in the big casinos as it gets picked up? Or can they entice that many new people to gamble?
Well, there's always the argument, and it comes up, you hear it on the floor of the State House, people will say there's only so many gambling dollars to be had. But now with this move by revenue, I think we become the second gambling, ranked number 2 in gambling behind Nevada. So they think it can be a big money. I wonder, they sold us on that package in 2006 on property tax, benefits. Your property tax will go down thanks to all this gambling. Has anybody really seen a big, drastic decline in that?
And I'm one of its tavern games too, where they got overly rosy on the revenue as well, and then didn't pan out. But the larger policy question here, Terry, is the way the state is now financing itself. Mm-hmm. When it comes to difficult questions about revenue, they go to sin, they go to smoking, they go to gambling, staying away from those more difficult, more structural choices.
Look, we're all, I'm going to get personal. We're all parents, right? We're all fathers here. Fact of the matter is that not the VGTs, but the internet gambling that they're going to make legal, on the record they will say that's to entice younger folks to gamble. How in the long run is that good? I mean, and I'm not opposed to gaming. I'm not, getting on the high road here and walking around, morally speaking out here. But why do we want to attract young people to gamble? I mean, does that make any sense on any level? I
mean, I'm sort of value neutral on this. People will be parted from their money. However they choose. That's the direction the technology is going in. That's the direction the society is going in. We could have a larger moral and ethical debate about whether it's wise to allow, start hitting kids at 18 to gamble, but we hit them on other stuff to become customers when they're that young as well.
That's true. I'm just a little reluctant.
I'm not a fan. Don't get me wrong.
No, and I'm not opposed to gambling. I mean, look, it's here. It's going to stay. It's regulated. That's fine. I just get nervous about, and maybe it's inevitable.
I don't mind taking a harder road than John on this. You talk to anybody who lives near a casino or runs a charity organization near a casino, and they will tell you the number of destitute, the number of homeless will go up when a casino comes to your neighborhood.
And both of us, we've all done the stories about the people who leave their kids in the car so they can go inside and play the slots. I mean, there are broader sort of structural societal problems as well.
Yeah. So this is just in the implementing stage, right? I mean, we have the law. There's a whole series of steps, and licenses have to be sold. And is the revenue, and we have no clue ultimately how much revenue this is going to generate.
Right.
Do we really?
No, and I think that's the hard part. We go back to the 2006 decision, and we're all sitting here talking about gambling, but it was still only this much of the budget, while borrowing from the tobacco fund was $1.5 billion.
Yeah, just to make sure everybody's clear. Let's say about a $2.2 billion deficit. That's just to get the current budget balanced, the $32 billion. They ended up passing a law that will say to the governor, borrow, $1.2 something billion from the tobacco settlement. He originally wanted to borrow it from the liquor control operation. It's all very confusing. We'll have these guys back to explain this at some point. So ultimately, John, we don't know what kind of revenue it's going to produce, but the expansion, it looks to me like it's going to affect just millions of people.
Well, yeah, I mean, Mike nailed it. They'll be within 25 miles of existing casinos. You'll have them in truck stops, in taverns, in restaurants. For all I know,
and on these
smartphones. And for all I know, are like daycares and church halls, for God's sake. But I mean, it is as big an expansion as we've ever seen. Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to thank you guys for coming in. This has been a great update. All right, coming up, we're going to talk about an important education subject and more, and we'll do that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Well, joining me now is Dolores McCracken. She's the president of the Pennsylvania State Education Association. All right, let's chat a little bit about this tuition vouchers. First of all, they tend to be controversial. Tell the folks out there, what's a tuition voucher?
Tuition voucher, which is now being referred to as an education savings account, would give the basic state funding to a parent, guardian, to use in any private school.
So in other words, you would get a sum of money from the state. It would be like giving you a check. You could take that check and send your kids to a private school. A private school funded by the state of Pennsylvania. That's correct? All right. Now, you have some concerns, particularly about a bill that was recently voted out of the State Education Committee. What's your concern about that?
The bill actually failed in the Education Committee.
Right.
The concerns were that, concerns are, and will always be about vouchers, is the money that it siphons from our public schools. This particular voucher bill, if 1/3 of students took advantage of this, would cost public schools $500 million.
That's not an insignificant amount of money.
It is not. And when you look at the funding cuts that our schools suffered in 2011, that was $500 million.
So but philosophically, there's always this big debate, and this has been going on for a long time, about how much state funding should go to private schools. Should they raise the money on their own? You know, if they want to raise their money on their own, that's fine. How much public financing should they get? And then you add to that, if they get public financing, how much of that should come out of the pool of money that's normally reserved for the public schools? Take off on that.
Take off on that. Public schools are education for the students of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And when you take that money and you give it to private schools, when you take taxpayer dollars and give it to private schools, there is no accountability.
Yeah. So a couple of follow-up questions. All right, it failed. Are you concerned that it will pass? I mean, obviously you have that concern. I mean, what do you think the likely status? Let me make the point another way. The state has a huge fiscal problem right now. You know, $2.2 billion deficit. They're trying to fund by borrowing more than half of it from the tobacco settlement. How does that fit overall with education funding, the $500 million?
Right now, Pennsylvania is 47th in the nation. The state of Pennsylvania funds approximately 32 cents for every dollar that is spent on public education. The rest of that money comes from taxpayers, comes from homeowners.
And we're going to get to that in another way in a minute. Go ahead, finish your thought.
When you're talking about doing something like this, this is something that needs to serve all students. This needs to improve public education, and a voucher bill doesn't do any of those things.
All right, well, let's run to a break. When we come back, I want to ask you about this property tax referendum question and the stability of the property tax versus other possibilities, and then what does that mean for what's a huge issue in this state? We've chatted about this before. You can give us an update on teacher shortage and what that could mean, and we'll get to that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, advancing quality, improving lives.
Welcome. I'm talking to Dolores McCracken. She's the president of PSEA. All right, you heard in the last segment, in the earlier part of the show, we were talking with a couple of reporters about the property tax. It would ultimately lead to a constitutional amendment if it passes the legislature in 2 sessions that would completely allow school districts to completely eliminate the property tax. The property tax is unpopular. I don't know anyone who wants to pay it, but it's stable. Go ahead. You have some thoughts on that?
Right now, school districts have the ability to eliminate property taxes by 50%.
50%.
This bill would give them the opportunity to eliminate taxes by 100%.
Completely.
Since they've not been able to reach the 50% threshold we might as well make it 200%.
Oh, I get your point. They haven't been able to do 50, so giving them 100 doesn't make a big difference.
Right.
But what about this fact that it's a pretty stable tax? I mean, again, we all get that bill and we go, oh my gosh, we don't like it, but you'd have to replace it, as John and Mike were talking about, with a very large tax hike in other ways.
Well, in 2011, when we lost $500 million in public school funding, that money came from taxpayers. That money came from property owners.
Sure.
In addition to the money that property owners needed to pay to make up that difference, they did that after having cut programs, after having taken 27,000 educators out of the public school system.
Right.
So when you're 47th in the nation funding your schools, state's paying 33 cents on a dollar, the homeowners are paying the rest.
Yeah. On another subject, this is very important. It's something that I think you and I have chatted about before, but I want to bring it up again because I don't think most folks are aware of it. I forget about it. A teacher shortage, something we never thought would exist before, given the strength of our teacher education schools, particularly in the state system of higher ed. What's the situation right now with the teacher shortage?
The enrollment in student preparation programs is significantly down. People entering the profession is significantly down. Our school districts all around the state right now are suffering from a shortage in substitutes.
In substitutes. So forget talking about regular teachers. It's when teachers are ill, blah, blah, blah. Go ahead, finish your thought.
When you lose 27,000 educators, you would think that you would have a surplus of teachers on the substitute list. And that has not happened.
Yeah. It's my sense also that I keep reading that because we have a bunch of younger people coming along, that's just going to put more pressure on schools. And I won't even get into the subject of the content of what has to be taught and the fact that you all get regulations from somewhere else, either school districts or the state of Pennsylvania, that tells teachers what they must teach and almost how they must teach.
Yes.
And so that creates another kind of problem, correct?
It absolutely does. And if you talk to some of our young educators today, they'll say that when I came into this profession, I didn't know it was going to look like this.
Yeah, great point.
They do have their experiences in the classroom as they're studying, but it's very different when now everyone is looking at you.
Okay, we have less than a minute. What's the solution?
I think the solution is for us to stop demonizing teachers, for us to treat them with the dignity that they deserve.
What can I say as a college professor? Go ahead. You agree?
I agree with you.
Yeah.
This is a noble profession. You know, you have a young mind in your hands.
We're out of time, but I think there's less of it than we've seen the demonization in the last couple of years. I hope that continues.
Well, I think it's an entire move to destroy public education.
All right, thanks. We'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.